Greetings and welcome back to another discussion. Might add a long-awaited discussion. I'm with none other than Colttaine, the great red kangaroo slayer of 4,000 kangaroos, no fewer, to talk
Howdy.
about his latest video as well as recent video of mine. The context specifically and more broadly is how human beings don't really understand the impact of their own behavior, and something I addressed and he addressed as well in terms of the long term. Very good at understanding, at least in theory, some of us. You don't want to put your hand in a fire, the immediate aftermath, and that would be a great deal of pain and damage. But in terms of our behaviors, that were it's much vaguer, and in part, I would suspect, and I'd like to hear Coltane's take on this, because not only because you have a longer time lapse, but also because it's very difficult to intuit exactly what's going to happen. If you eat like shit and become morbidly obese, I mean, something's probably going to happen. It's not exactly clear, and it might take 10 or 15 years. If
Yeah.
you slut it up throughout your teen years as a female and 20s, I'd argue that that's even less clear because a lot of these women have so lack self-awareness that they think that has no impact whatsoever. But
Yeah.
it's different from, oh, there's a sharp knife there. You don't want to cut your finger on it because it's obvious, right?
Yeah. Well, I guess in a lot of ways, it's. Uh, I mean, the obesity thing is probably a good place to start, where there's always been that problem of short term gains versus like, or how would I say it? Short term gratification versus long term gains.
Mm.
That chocolate cake is going to taste really good right now, but it's a lot harder to see, you know, how that chocolate cake over, you know, 10 years is going to stack on the pounds.
Yep.
Um, and yeah, I guess trying to manage your diet now so that you're not overweight 10 years down the track. It's kind of you're sacrificing short-term gains for long-term gains. They're they're harder to see, they're harder to quantify, and you have to yeah, you effectively have to make short-term sacrifices for those long-term gains.
And yet, in the case of the chocolate cake, and I think you and I are both familiar with streaks of dietary success as well as checkered by streaks of unfortunate binge eating. I think, yeah, I believe you've
Mm.
told me that. So I mean, I've been there, done that. I mean, obviously there's this awareness, right? I mean, and even a person with no knowledge of nutrition knows that, if you're 50 kilograms overweight, that's probably not a good thing. And there's some
Mm.
connection, however vague, between the type and above all the quantity of food in terms of caloric energy that you're taking in.
Yeah.
And yet, so there's the question of delayed gratification versus immediate gratification.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing when it comes to reproduction and sexuality, I think, is that perhaps because we just don't talk about it, and we can get to that. But I don't think, some girl who loses her virginity at 15 and then from 15 onwards until 30 has had something like 300 pp's, that or even more, that I mean, yes, there's a question of maybe it feels good and whatever, but the connection between her having lots of uninhibited sex and many, many different sexual partners, I don't know if it's a
Mm.
perfect analog to someone with even the vaguest awareness that consuming chocolate cake every day long. I mean, they kind of know it, they do it anyway.
Yeah.
Whereas I think there's a degree of kind of lack of conscious awareness to the activity of this hypothetical female that it
Mm.
doesn't really map on it. It could just be because, well, one, it's not obvious, right? Especially with when the cultural signals aren't there, because I think they are somewhat important. But it's also somehow different. So, I'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I guess I mean there's kind of a lot of people that don't see side effects to sex, I guess. I mean,
Hmm.
there's side effects to alcohol consumption, there's side effects to chocolate cake consumption, but the, I guess there's kind of like this. I mean, there very obviously is side effects to sex, whether it's pregnancy or whether it's STDs or perhaps even, as I spoke about in my video, just kind of like the reputational question as to whether or not you're actually capable of maintaining monogamous intimacy. But I think a lot of people don't see it or refuse to accept that even exists. I think sex is just something that you do, and then as soon as the sex is done, it's like there's just no consequences to it. Um, I think like there are some things you can see from like long term. There are some long term implications. Like there is a fertility window, and when that runs out, which I sort of see more and more often these days, like these women start panicking and they're like, "Oh, I'm 30 now and I'm not married. I want to have babies or whatever." But even then, like someone, I can't remember whether it was on Reddit or a comment on one of my videos, someone was saying that the women that he works with or was in college with or something like that, just they didn't even accept that. Like they didn't even believe there was a fertility window. They just believed that they could do whatever they wanted, and if they get that old, oh well, IVF will solve it. Some technology will solve the problem for them. Like there's just a complete denial of any kind of limitations on human biology when it comes to sex.
How much, yeah, and one needs to ask the question, how much is this is attributable to something like birth control? One thinks the one big concern historically, prehistorically, pardon me, it's early here, and my throat's a bit funny, that everyone had, or women in particular, was, and the one consequence that seemed obvious was pregnancy, in particular unwanted pregnancy,
Yeah,
rather than all the other, with STDs, reputational damage. I mean, yeah, in the same sense that if you spend every day for a week eating, I don't know, a 4,000 calorie chocolate cake, assuming you're relatively small of stature, and on top of everything else you eat, you're gonna, get fatter. Everyone knew that. I'm not so sure. I wonder if the pill said it put us on the course to just slowly decouple all concerns and all
yeah,
consequences associated with sex, because it was such a watershed moment and such a watershed effect that
yeah.
you don't need to get pregnant.
I would say the pill started it, but then I think like from the pill, there's also been a fairly concerted, I don't know what you would call it, advertising campaign to attempt to remove all the other stigmas associated with it. Um, yeah, I think the pill was definitely what biologically decoupled it. But then yeah, there's been a fairly strong push to, don't tell me what to wear, teach men not to rape, sort of shit. Um, like there's just been a very concerted effort, um, publicity effort after that by largely feminists, but women more broadly, to try and just take off any kind of it's like now that we can't get pregnant, we can do whatever we want, and you can't tell us not to, sort of thing. And that's fine. Like I said in my video, if women all want to slap each other on the back and say "you go, girl," I mean that's great for them. They can do that. But yeah, the idea that there's going to be no consequences at all, that you know, and I think that's possibly part of it too. Like that idea that women sort of own and control sex. So I don't know if it even occurs to them, to the average woman, that men actually have preferences.
Well, probably
So it's
not.
like,
And to the extent that they do, they're probably irrelevant. You know.
well, I'm just sort of thinking like it's that very idea that like, um, it's we can do whatever we want, and if men express preferences, well, they're misogynists.
Hmm.
I remember there used to be this I think it might have been a Tumblr or something like that. It was like the nice guys of OK Cupid, where they'd screenshot pictures of guys that claim to be nice guys, but then said things that they didn't like, and they're like, "Look at this hypocrite." One of the things that they always used to bang on about was um, OK Cupid used to have you answer questions, like you do quizzes,
Mm,
and it would theoretically be able to match you up with people better if you answered quiz questions similar, like if you had similar values, for example. One of the things that feminists always used um, to bang on about with the nice guys at Cupid was there was a question in there: do you think women are obligated to shave? And they used to go on and on. Look at this misogynist who thinks women are obligated to shave. And it's like, well, I wouldn't say women are obligated to shave, but men aren't obligated to find hairy women attractive either.
I mean,
And it's just
also,
this.
yeah,
Mm,
on seeming that you're not. I mean, you could walk out in your boxers in the streets of wherever in winter. I think that would be no one. I mean, everyone. It's not illegal in most places. You could do that. You would be look really funny. You'd probably be cold, but
yeah,
yeah, it's one of these things. Yeah, you're not obligated to dress in quote unquote proper attire,
yeah.
but
Uh,
yeah.
and I think that was kind of, it was a poorly worded question, but the feminists kind of took it to mean that, like, men having a preference for women that shave, they're misogynist. Like, women don't have to live up to men's standards. It was that kind of attitude.
By
Um,
feminist, of course, you mean my famous quip of a sort of lowercase f feminist, but basically just women. Uh,
well, I think in this case, like, I'm pretty sure the nice guys of OK Cupid
mm,
Tumblr was probably run by a radfem, but
I see.
yeah, there seems to be this persistent attitude that women can do whatever they want, and women are quite open about the fact that they prefer men over 6 feet tall,
Mm,
and in a high income earning bracket. Like, if you actually looked at all of the things that the average woman seeks in a man, only about probably 5% of the male population could live up to that. Um, they have very high expectations of what they expect in a male partner. But yeah, as soon as men are like, start putting provisos on the type of woman that they want, that's, verboten.
yeah, yeah. Well, it does. It bespeaks a kind of well, just a rather again this sort of lack of awareness, and
Mm.
probably mostly stemming from indifference. I don't think women particularly care, especially in today's environment, what men want one way or another. And
Well,
I mean, they
I
do and
don't
they
know if.
don't. They do and they know the signals they have to exude and send out, but that's not
Mm.
the
See, I think I don't think it is indifference. I think it's complete unawareness, because
hmm,
these women, as was shown in that post by the ex sex worker,
hmm,
they all want a high value man, to use the FDS lingo. They all want a HVM,
hmm.
but they don't seem to understand that high value men have standards. And if you behave like that, you're not going to meet those standards. That's where you see like these articles written by fat chicks where they're like, just because I'm fat doesn't mean I should have to lower my standards. And I'm like, well, yes, it
I,
does. Um, I think a lot of women aren't aware of the sexual marketplace. They aren't aware of sexual market value, and to the extent that they are, they think it's a crazy misogynist red pill conspiracy. Like, I'm pretty sure that like, on some instinctual level, they must recognize that some individuals are more attractive than others and are sought after more than others. But yeah, they seem to be very resistant to the idea that there is actually a strict structural framework that human sexuality happens in, and that
it's
certain behaviors and things place them higher or lower in that framework, and that men exist in this framework, and men, particularly the high value men that they want, do have standards. mean, that's why we see all of these "Where have all the good men," articles.
Yeah,
Um, this idea that broke men are ruining American women's marriage prospects.
mm. Well, I think it speaks also to there's a general lack of awareness of these things. I remember recently I had a conversation with it was almost exclusively male, I believe, bunch of people, very bright people, coders, programmers, tech savvy people, occasional scientists, mathematician, and they're just talking about dating, and you wouldn't make the connection that these people were dealing with some very complex issues at work or just in the science they're
Mm,
pursuing because I mentioned that, well, this is something that we can discuss, I mean, but that looks are supremely important, irrespective of sex, and I try to give the example that how people sometimes it's for public consumption, we as human beings, we say one thing, we do another thing. So the example I would cite, in addition to the one you cited in your own video with the sex worker, like, I wouldn't have a problem. Mm, it- it- there are plenty of people out there who, on paper or in a conversation, would say something to
mm,
the effect of, if someone was very overweight and they had a good personality, I'd probably date them. But
yeah.
the numbers of people who would actually conform to the statement in terms of action, by their deeds you shall know them, vanishingly
Mm,
small. And these people were just clueless about these things. One of the things that I mean, whatever his flaws, Monday, who the deceased departed Monday from YouTube put out, he had this video about weight, both weight loss stories and weight gain stories, and it was fascinating. So these were
mm,
people who were in some cases fabulously overweight to obese with
yeah.
other problems, psychological depression, etc. And in many cases, they retain these psychological issues, but for whatever reason, they
Mm,
manage to knock the weight off significantly.
yeah.
And all of a sudden, the behavior towards them shifted and changed. They were blown away by it. They didn't do anything. And for years, they were fed this poppycock about, well, you got to be more humorous and, got to work on your personality. And all it really was get down to the fact that they were 50 or 70 kilos overweight and nobody wanted to talk to them and then it was for both men and women, by the way. All of a sudden, people were
Yeah.
friendly, nicer to them, and the reverse also happened. He cited a story or two of women in particular. I remember one who, she was really attractive. She gained a whole bunch of weight, and people stopped holding doors for her and being nice to her. And it, I mean, when you have there's that's the realities in this case of sort of fatness or just obesity. But this is just one example. We tell ourselves all sorts of stories about what is
Yeah.
acceptable, but then like what is beauty is only skin deep, but we're deeply superficial
Yeah.
creatures ultimately.
And there's another aspect of that as well, which is I've heard happen. um, I know personally at least one person that it has happened to, which is you know guys who because for the most part when like it's kind of going off on a bit of a tangent before I get to the point, but
That's fine.
women have hugely overrated sense of sexual marketplace value where like average women who are a 5, like average women still want the 10 male.
Hmm.
um, Once they hit 30 and that biological jangle of the biological clock starts kicking in and they're like, I need to settle down and get married, otherwise I'm never having kids, they will settle for somebody closer in their like closer to their range of sexual market value. um, I think with women that sort of results in a bit of resentment for the significant other because they are settling, they think they deserve better but they're settling. um, One of the things I've heard a lot about and I have seen happen at least once to someone I knew was that they'd gotten married. They were married. The wife was a little bit overweight, um, and then for whatever reason, the people decide they want to make changes in their wife. The wife start in their life. The wife started going to the gym, eating better, dropped the weight, and then it's kind of thrown things out of whack because now her sexual market value has gone up a little bit,
Hmm.
and I guess she kind of saw herself as being okay. Well, now I'm hotter. You know, my my sexual market value is higher than my husband's now, so I need to monkey branch. Basically, she started cheating on him.
It's very common,
Marriage
by the way. I've seen it
marriage
for
broke
both men and
down.
women who lose weight.
Yeah,
They enter the marriage in a certain sort of weight state, so to speak, and
yeah,
one of them loses the weight, and then there's a kind of disconnect, and occurs with both sexes, in fact.
yeah.
It's been documented. Yeah.
But yeah, it's just that fact that even within the marriage, if you're not aware of how these function, if you're not aware of the framework of human sexuality, you can have this happen where you might think you're happily married, but then if she loses like 5, 10 kilos, and the sexual market value of the marriage shifts, where you were both fives and now she's suddenly a 6.5.
Hmm.
That can.
Well, I wonder how much of this is just people have lost the ability to read between the lines. I think increasingly we're living in an era of at least virtual insanity in some ways.
Mm,
That people saying, yeah, I would date somebody who's 50 kilos overweight if they had a good personality, as if that's an actual statement that maps onto reality rather than a kind of a placeholder that we
yeah,
use in polite society. It's kind of like back in the day, there's a gathering of relatives, and Aunt Jane clearly gained a whole bunch of weight. But you're gonna say, "Oh, you look really nice." You're not gonna say, "Well, you've turned into a fat, disgusting cow, Aunt Jane. You better work on
yeah,
that." And so I think we have lost that ability to read between the lines. People take some of these niceties and the superficial stuff we put out, that's a separate discussion of whether or not that it's necessary for
yeah.
functional society, but quite literally at face
But
value
I think
rather
I think
than
part of
mm.
what's
Go on.
I was just going to say, I think like what's sort of happening is those niceties that used to exist are now starting to be legislated. Um,
Mm.
I think there's this misconception that if we force everyone, fat acceptance is a good thing. Where if we force everyone to, use the right words and be polite, then unfortunately, whilst people may well be polite, it doesn't mean they're going to find fat people sexually attractive. It's the whole biology, culture, ideology thing. You can change the language we use, and you can enforce a level of etiquette, but that's not going to change the underlying biology of the human ape.
No, and I
Um,
think the
so there's
problem, yeah. Well, the problem with this I see is that people can become, in their own minds, wholly convinced that, however it's legislated, or
yes,
that is the reality, and this is where the disconnect
yeah,
occurs, where the sex worker is baffled, or some of these people that were just totally nonplussed when they lost 50 kilo. Why is everyone nice to me? Chicks are into me all of a sudden, and
yeah,
they just because the legislation, as it were, I don't mean official, but sort of the cultural um, the cultural lingo is such that people are really believing everything at face value,
yeah,
and then
and
get
I
floored by the reality when it hits them.
yeah, and I think that's the problem. Is like there's a lot of people out there that I don't know. I guess the best way to say it is they believe everything they see on television, and
Yeah.
they've bought into the Disney mythos of happily ever after, and the reality is not like that. Like I
No.
said, like
No.
there was that yeah this I think is where all of these good men, where are all the good men gone articles come from, where you've got these women like the one I mentioned in my video, where they think they've got forever, and they're like, I'll focus on my career now, and then they cross the threshold into their sort of early 30s, and then suddenly realize that the young hot guys that were after them, or hot guys in their age cohort that were going after them, are now going after younger women, and they've kind of missed the boat. They it just they believed the I guess, yeah, they believed the nonsense that they were told, that the party was just going to keep going on forever, and they could just
Well,
choose to get off and settle down whenever it was convenient for them. And that's just not how
I've
anything in
noticed.
life really works.
Well, I was, yeah, how anything in life that with emphasis on anything in life. I noticed this goes well beyond the sort of the question of women, although it's obviously that's what we're focusing on now. The
Mm,
people, I try to explain. I'll encounter young people, and say I'm in my 40s, and it's, I'm not young anymore. So, whoa, and there's this. This is a platitude I think people take her a little too literally. Like, your 40s or your new 20s. And no, you have to
yeah,
change your training. You're less durable. There are differences. And you can keep good shape and whatever, but there are differences. Your endocrinology is worse, basically de
yeah,
facto. And I think people are in general, and I think a lot of this is sort of the mirage of the sort of what I coined years ago as the mechanization effect. As we create structures in society, whether they're physical structures like buildings or the kinds of virtual structures we have online, we create at least a perception or an illusion of moving away from our biological baseline, which has always been a constraining force, to the point where
yeah,
people actually start believing that the biology that underlies their entire system, including their
mm,
psychology preferences, limitations, that 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 doesn't really count. And so, yeah, if you're 50, it's the new 25. No, I mean, which is not to say
mm,
that if you were in horrible shape at 25 and all of a sudden you got, yeah, you would be in sort of comparatively speaking better. But the point is, aging is real. It has consequences. There's a host of things where people have really bought into a kind of, as you put it, it's kind of an old man thing, but I like it. They believe everything that they see on television, and I think society promotes this by all of its amenities, all the relative ease. Because let's be honest, um, back in the day, people had a much greater awareness of really their own mortality and just all the risks. There's
yeah,
a famous thing you might have heard of. I mean, I know you have a background in art. Have you ever heard of the Dance of Death? It's mostly a literary trope, but there's some art from the Middle Ages, and a lot of
mm,
it emerged in the wake of the Black Death, which wiped out a third of Europe. So a hyper awareness that right around the corner the Grim Reaper is there now. You could say that's swinging the
yeah,
opposite direction, but what modernity seems to have done is it's erected all these illusions that are very
yeah,
convenient for as a blockade to, how are human beings actually? What do we really do? What do we actually think?
yeah,
What are the real consequences of our behavior?
yeah. And you kind of see it at almost every level where things like consequences are being disassociated. Like people now, they go off to hospital to die.
Yeah,
It's not in your face like it was 150 years ago.
yeah,
Um, the whole nuclear family thing as well, where 150 years ago it was really an extended family that
yeah,
lived. You'd have like 3, 4 generations potentially under one roof.
yeah.
That doesn't happen anymore. You don't live with your grandparents, and even online, like the disassociation between people's real life and their online persona. Like I've known a number of girls who are overweight, um, who were into anime, and their online picture, like their avatar or whatever, it's always some like slim, like it's made to look like them, quote unquote, like same eye color, same hair color, same type of clothing and stuff, but it's like an idealized, slim, pretty version of them.
Yeah.
There seems to be this huge disassociation between the way we want to view things and what we accept and the actual reality that's beyond the computer screen. I guess the problem is like at at what's the point, like, because sooner or later you're going to run into a situation where reality is going to catch up with you. I mean, a
Yep.
perfect example would be the current ongoing election dramas in the US, where I think I thought Trump was probably going to win. I think the numbers have gone the other way. I think he's going to lose this one. But the Democrats, still, even after the crushing defeat of 2016, still believed all the polls and thought that a blue wave was coming. Like the they thought it was going to be a blue wave landslide election. The fact that the president, it's so close that the president still hasn't been called 4 days later now.
Mm.
They lost something like 7 or 8 seats
And
in the House of
there are
Representatives.
possible indications of voter fraud as well, sort of magic.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But, I mean, but yeah, they didn't see this reality coming, and it's caught up with them. Um, but I mean, the part of the problem is they're the ones. I guess this is the issue when you let people set their own, like, you're letting people define their own reality, I guess. One of the things that I
Yeah.
found interesting about this whole election cycle in the US is we had to listen for 4 fucking years from Democrats about Russian collusion. And they had several investigations which turned up absolutely fucking nothing. But then you look at what like Google, Facebook, and Twitter have been doing this election cycle. I mean, you want to talk about election tampering? They have been far worse than anything the supposed Russians did in the
Well, on that
2016. Like, what
point,
was?
it's
Hmm,
amazing how well Trump has done considering all the opposition he has from every front,
yeah,
Google, mainstream, etc.
yeah. But I guess the thing is, like, Google, Twitter, and Facebook have been working very hard to like outright ban certain news stories about Hunter Biden from their platforms. You had Twitter putting, warning labels on virtually every tweet that the president made. Like, this is like, if you were to believe what you saw on Facebook and Google and Twitter, yeah, you probably would have believed there was going to be a blue wave. But unfortunately, it you know it didn't match the reality of what the American people, like the average Joe out in bumfuck Idaho, actually wanted.
Yeah, and I mean, getting back to sort of more biological aspects of things, I think my sense is that a lot of this, as I look at history unfolding, is an inevitability. Like, a lot of people longing for the alleged good days of yore and traditional blah blah blah. With certain levels of technology, relative safety and security get seemingly a kind of universal paradigm where a shift away from one pattern, because human beings are pretty reasonably flexible in their behavior, particularly reproductive behavior, from X to Y and then to Z. I wonder if this is just, if we were to run this experiment on a simulation, take in a different reality human beings and just, put them in this virtual world that we're all inhabiting, and you and I mean, we spend a lot of time on we're sort of, we dip our feet in both the reality and the virtual reality. If this is inevitability, this inability to square reality with what feels good, almost, it's sort of like being on holiday from reality. But as you pointed out, that at some point in time the holiday ends. It hits you in the face, as my
Mm,
as my father likes to say, we all have to face the music.
yeah,
Um, and I wonder if this is just another one of these things where, well, yeah, if you have an apparatus like the internet and you have all this other stuff, people are going to start believing loony things. I mean, they're actual people, like, these other kinfolk, right?
yeah,
I think some of them are sincere. They actually think that they have some,
mm,
spiritual connection to a wolf or an owl or whatever it is, an aardvark they think that they are, or, you know,
yeah,
and I don't think that could be enabled without the kind of virtual reality we experience online. And I
yeah.
think,
Well,
you know,
it actually did used to be one of the big problems when you get people like uh, I can't remember her name now. Um, crazy religious lady who drowned her 5 kids
I don't
because
recall her
she
name
did.
either. Yeah.
You know who I'm talking about, though,
I
right?
believe so, yes.
Yeah. So, like, not all religious people are crazy, but when you have a framework like Christianity, which frankly is a crazy ideology, it makes it where like you get these people who are like, I believe that God's punishing all of us because a talking snake told a lady to eat an apple. Like it's crazy shit. But when you have so many people that claim to believe in the truth of the Bible, it becomes very difficult to filter out the people who are actually mentally ill. And I think that's probably what we're seeing with the other kin type folks, where um, you've got all of these like feminists and you know social constructivists saying like people can be whatever they want to be, and I don't know how much they really believe it, because I think we're already starting to see like pushback on that when it comes to transgender people competing in the upper echelons of sport.
Hmm.
Should should the Iranian soccer team have free op quote unquote trans women on the team? Is that fair? Um, but yeah, I think there's when you have enough people saying, "Oh no, like gender's a social construct, you can be whatever you want to be," that's where you're going to start running into problems where it's like, is this otherkin person just like a wannabe furry that's putting it on, or are they actually mentally ill? Um, I think yeah,
Well,
when we start obscuring
I
what
would
is actually real.
I would be hesitant to so mental illness is kind of, obviously I'm not a psychologist. It's a very it's broad but also a specific category because really what we're talking about is general human tendencies to obscure unpleasant realities in order to cope better ultimately. So I mean, the reason
Mm,
why, for example, we say, oh, yeah, well, I'll date someone who's 50 kilos over, it's because it makes many of us feel better to hear that,
yeah,
even though it flies in the face of what is real. And it, I mean, or another one is, beauty is in the eye of the eye of the beholder. When we know they're very good, especially these days, there's a number of there's one particular very good channel that does detailed facial analysis of the kind of symmetries that make an aesthetic face universally. But they'll say,
yeah,
well, I'm sure there are people who like gigantic pecan noses or whatever. Like, yeah, probably there might be a fetish for that, but generally speaking,
mm,
if you have a huge nose that's disproportionate, that's not an attractive feature. And
yeah,
I think we do this all the time. I
yeah,
think well here's I mean here let me I've, we've talked about this in the past. You're aware of this, um, but it, the idea of risk management theory in evolution is kind of it's kind of better for your psychological preservation to believe, sorry, error management theory, my apologies. It's better for your psychological well-being to believe something that is almost certainly a lie than it is to constantly have to deal with harsh reality. And this is, for example, been cited. This isn't hard evidence, but why are women more religious? Because the cost benefit, on average, the cost benefit
mm,
to greater religiosity is such that they lose out less by believing in the superstitious or supernatural, um, versus uh, in some the lesser religiosity of men. I think that it might be a function of that ultimately, where this is what we do. We tell each other stories that aren't necessarily true because they do in some way benefit us. And
mm,
under the surface, though, obviously we're still acting in accordance with reality. And that's where I think we're meeting this conflict where there's a kind of punitive level. The people involved have kind of taken the tales we've told a little too seriously, and I guess this is what we've been talking about, sort of
yeah,
inflating reality, versus that's what we say so we don't. And and I'm all for that. I
mm,
don't want to go on just insulting people nonstop. That's not my personality. But you can. I think there's a way around that. You can say, look, you're definitely not a terrible person because you're grossly overweight. There's nothing to do with that. This is just not totally irrelevant. I could say that with full conviction. I don't think that your weight is a defining category of your your humanity. However, you have to be aware of the fact that if you're grossly overweight, that's going to redound not to your benefit. It's going to be overall a negative, not just health wise. People are going to perceive you differently. Things like the halo
Mm.
effect. Um, I think you can, in theory, strike a happy medium, a balance where you're saying, look, you are a quote unquote good guy, you're or whatever girl, or you're fine, you have good qualities, but all that notwithstanding, if you continue on the path that you're currently on with eating the chocolate cake every day, it doesn't matter what your good qualities because there's a hierarchy. We're super superficial, to a bit of
Yeah,
redundancy, but the halo effect tells it all. I mean, people literally, for the audience who still are unaware of this, I mean, we perceive attractive and particularly tall people, especially men, as more competent. You could, if you just, if you had nothing else to go on, all things being seemingly equal, let's say one guy had a couple extra years experience in a job and had some good recommendations versus the guy who was tall and handsome. Like one guy is, 6'4", the other guy is 5'7". A lot of people are just going to infer that the taller guy, even though he might not be more competent in the job, is going to. So we have this stuff goes. We just need to. I think people. It's important that people are aware of this, and you don't need to go the full opposite direction, which I think a lot of people. I understand the pushback. I think a lot of people, for example, would address the obesity. There's really just this extreme I've seen where and this is a good example. They say, oh, there's no problem. There's a rainbow of beauty, and it can be also found in the versus you're basically just a horrible person if you're obese, and I think that neither is a correct assessment. And we've lost
yeah.
that middle ground in general, politically too. We've lost that ability to collaborate around a middle ground, which takes into account reality without just making absurd statements one way or another. You know?
The problem is that it doesn't matter that your statement isn't absurd. It doesn't matter. You can be as nice and try to, categorically pigeonhole the weight issue away from every other aspect of the person, like their personhood. That's not how they're going to interpret it. They're going to take it as a personal insult. And we're living in a world now where you're not allowed to insult anyone for any reason. You, it's very quickly becoming against, like actually against the law to hurt someone's feelings.
Yeah, it's fascinating though how selective we are. This goes back to the sort of male female issue. I mean, there have been repeated examples of shorter men just over a lifetime earning less. I mean, to the point where I saw one statistic, and I can't verify this is actually true, somewhere between the equivalent of 250 to 300,000 less USD on average than taller men over a
Mm,
lifetime. That's a lot, it's a big chunk of money. You'd think people would be up in arms about this. I mean, that's discrimination, right? And
mm.
not that, I mean, I'm not exactly a fountain of wealth myself. I mean, I'm not going to just say it's because I'm only 5'8", but I am 5'8", but or 5'8.5", depending on how you measure it. 174 in centimeters. I hate the foot system, but the point is that it's very selective what people get outraged about, right? Nobody is up in arms about short men literally, no pun intended, getting the short end of the stick, right? Uh,
Yeah.
so yeah.
Well, we've kind of got the whole, I guess, the the left was, haven't heard the term in a while, but they called it the progressive stack to,
Yeah.
the hierarchy of who's most discriminated against. So there's like a victim hierarchy where white men, it doesn't really matter. Short, they're not allowed to complain.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Well,
but I mean, and it's interesting, like where the blame seems to be pushed down the progressive stack as well, where you've got like the black feminists will, complain that, feminism is what was it, solidarity for white women, and then, the they'll those ones will complain that the second generation trans exclusionary radical feminists. So like the blame kind of gets pushed down, and at the bottom of the stack, that's where you have the UN blaming the coronavirus, epidemic on the patriarchy. It's our fault, Stardust. You and me, we're personally responsible for that one.
What? I'm not. I'm not on. What? I'm confused. Somebody is.
It's the UN blamed the corona. They actually, it was hilarious. The UN had an official tweet that blamed the coronavirus epidemic on the patriarchy.
Eh?
So
Nobody takes that seriously though.
I
Well, I
don't know
hope
how
not.
seriously. I don't take it seriously, but when you have an intergovernmental organization like the United Nations putting that shit on their official Twitter account,
Hmm.
like that's the world we're living in.
Yeah, yeah. But and the thing that gets to me is I'm of a mind at this stage where there's certain when I'm engaged in discussion and there's a certain topic. Men and women are different. There are differences between men in personality and physiology, and these differences can lead to well, profoundly different outcomes in life. If for me, I'm at the stage where I don't have the patience to argue with people anymore. I don't. It's a bit
Yeah,
like flat Earth.
I'm
I don't want to spend even a minute arguing with the flat earther about whether or not the Earth is a oblate spheroid or not. It's a waste of time. And I think likewise, there's certain established facts at this stage of in our general broad understanding of the human condition that yeah, there's still a lot of mysteries, but some of the stuff is established. Men and women are different, often profoundly so at times. Um,
mm,
and I don't want to spend any time arguing at this stage with people about this because we've sequestered ourselves in these separate realities, we've just been talking about it. The people that are so
yeah,
convinced that it's this eternal cultural thing. I brought up example in the video. I try to use this argument because it usually works, not always. About the dinosaurs. But there's a
mm,
kind of it took a long time for biological organisms to develop a culture, and this is because biology takes precedence.
yeah,
I don't want to waste time with these people any more than I want to waste time with flat earthers. And apologies to any flat earthers in the audience. I don't think you'd be there in the audience, but it just doesn't. It's not.
you'd be surprised.
Well, it's not a good use of time. It'd be
Yeah,
like uh, somebody says, well, actually, all people are the exact same height, and you go outside and like, wait, that guy's tall. You sure? No,
yeah,
this is not the case. So let's move on, right? And I have no patience for it anymore. I think those of us who are interested in understanding the human condition or reality, I
yeah.
don't think we should
I'm
accord these people any time, frankly.
yeah. I think this year has been the straw that's broken the camel's back for me. I'm at a point
I've
now
noticed.
where I don't, as I've said to you before, I don't particularly like the term black pill, but that's pretty much where I'm at now. I'm just like, fuck everything. I'm sick of the whole world has gone crazy, and you know, I'll be goddamned if I'm gonna. It's not worth arguing with them anymore, and I'll be goddamned if I just burn the whole thing down. And particularly when it comes to these fucking people who are like, oh, defund the police. I'm at a point now where I'm just like, good, defund the police. Pull out all the police, pull out all the healthcare workers, take everything away from them and just let these fucking people eat each other. They've repeatedly said that they've repeatedly shown that they don't want to be part of a healthy, functional modern society. They don't want to accept reality. So why are we still trying to save these fucking idiots? Just let them eat each other. That's where I'm at.
Yeah. Well, it's a harsh pronouncement. I certainly wouldn't want to pay any lip service to the claims they're making. Um,
Mm,
but yeah, I mean, I've been quote unquote black pilled longer than you have been. But it's an interesting transformation. But I think it really just speaks to the fact that we're really just so far gone.
yeah,
A lot of these sort of podcasting pundits, so Eric Weinstein, Sam Harris, they talk about the sense making apparatus, and it seems to be completely haywire. I I mean, I'd like to think that my understanding, to the best of my ability, with all my limitations and relative stupidity of certain topics, is in touch with reality.
Yeah.
And to the extent it's not, I would be bothered by that, and I would want to correct it. Yeah, I wouldn't. I don't want to live. I don't want to pretend that yeah, just something isn't the case. You know, just sort of happy thoughts, sort of blowing the negative away. I mean, if I want to be, whether that comes to illness or otherwise, just so I just, yeah, I've kind of decided I'm just gonna just not engage at all with these sorts of people anymore. And I think it's still possible in certain circles to still have productive conversations. It's just since we don't ostensibly don't share common reality anymore, um, that's going to become increasingly difficult. And
Mm.
my concern, though, and this is an interesting question because because people are divided on this. So lunacy, or left-wing lunacy in particular these days, the denial of reality, just sort of this, yeah, just the splintering of our sense-making apparatus. Some people think that this is just really fringe. I've heard some political pundits say, yeah, these sorts of things happen, like when Charles Murray was attacked at Middlebury College in Vermont, but it's rare. Most of the time, and I know a guy Mao, a German guy, I've had him on before at German universities. His conviction, I think he's largely right, depending on the field or the department, are still quite functional. But my worry is that so when I mean, I don't want to get into a discussion about COVID or its relative risk here, but I know for a fact that they people were all too happy to prevent protesters in the United States initially when the lockdown rolled out that were
Mm.
more right-leaning. But when the BLM protesters and the rioting started, this was somehow justified due to whatever. I'm worried
Yeah.
about institutional creep where
Yeah. Well,
scientists aren't actually doing the science anymore. Because I'm not a scientist, but I sure as hell want, for example, the genomics revolution to continue. I want people to continue investigating sex
yeah.
differences and understanding these things. I don't want this to be disregarded just because but as you know, Colttaine, better than the vast majority of people, you know, politics is downstream from culture, but if the culture is so dominant as it stands now, we're at a stage where either people are going to just go silent and kind of silently, tuck their heads in their lab coats, proverbial lab coats, and just kind of try to,
Mm.
hear no evil, do no, see no evil, speak no evil, or they're just going to go pay fully fledged lip service. This was best embodied, I think, by the way, in a conversation between Sam Harris, an actual geneticist, a female geneticist, who clearly knew what the deal was on many issues. For example, that many disparities in society are at least partly, and if not in a majority, reducible to different outcomes in terms of the genes you inherit. And she was just pulling every trick in the book to just somehow elide that fact. And even though she's working in the field, I mean, she knew better than Sam Harris. So
Yeah.
I'm worried about the institutional creep. I'm worried about the point where, well, you guys can't do this work anymore because it's take your pick, sexist, racist. It's
Yeah.
not true because we define who we are and our genes aren't important or whatever it might be. You know, it's
Yeah.
worrisome.
Yeah. Well, I saw some tweets that were effectively going down that route because it was some, it was some press release about a new drug or something that was specifically. Oh, I remember what it was. It was the fact that they were saying like COVID affects black people, like people of African descent, more because of these specific receptors that it attaches to.
Hmm.
Apparently, people of African descent have more of these types of receptors.
Yeah.
And there was all of these people. I think it was published in, I don't know what it was, in the Journal of Nature or something like that. And you had all of these scientists dogpiling, like actual scientists in the field, dogpiling on it on Twitter, saying, "Oh, the Journal of Nature's buying into white nationalist racism. Everybody knows that there's no differences between races. Race is just a social construct." And it's like that's where we're at. But like I think I don't going back to something you said before, I don't think it's fringe. Um, like if you go onto Google right now and you Google Fortune 500 CEOs, for example, and it will have an image bar of all different pictures of CEOs. There's like 20 on the first page, and I think two of them are men.
Mm,
Like Google is used by about 85% of people on a daily basis.
mm.
Um, like our entire window to understanding and knowledge at this point is being filtered through these like political ideology. um I totally screwed up the wording. It's all coming through a political ideological filter.
Yeah.
Like it's not fringe, it's literally the matrix at this
I
point.
agree
It's
it's
all
not
around
fringe,
us.
but where do we get to the point? So, for example, it's documented. Yeah, I mean, I don't, spend too much time on the topic, but across populations, you'll have different. I'm a prime candidate for developing Alzheimer's. I have later. I have a specific polymorphism that raises my risk significantly over versus specifically APOE4 versus APOE2, which reduces risk. The point is, I this is much more common in European populations than any other population. You're not gonna, as far as I've looked into this, you look at East Asian populations, there's no documentation. It could have just understudied. The point is if you want good science to be done, you have to just accept certain things, right? Um,
Mm.
Skin cancer is much more common in um, Caucasoids than it is in other populations for obvious reasons. Uh, so what? I mean, I'm just I don't think it's fringe. I just want the scientists and the doctors and the medical profession and everybody to be able to do what they need to do, irrespective of whatever political climate we're in. I mean, I guess we have to grudgingly tolerate the lunacy that we see afoot in the world. On the other hand, I don't want to get to the point where we say, well, we're going to stop doing research on Alzheimer's and the genetics of Alzheimer's because everyone's the same, so it doesn't really matter. I mean, I hope we're not going to get there. I don't think we
Yeah.
will, but
Yeah, I
yeah,
think the science is probably always going to be shielded from it to some degree because I like I don't know anyone personally who like in my real like IRL that goes and reads scientific journal articles. I
mm,
do, but I'm like the odd one out.
mm.
So I think the general population is very detached from the actual research that is happening in science labs. So
Oh, tell me about it. Yeah,
I
yeah.
think they're somewhat shielded from it, but
Well, here's
for
another.
me,
Sorry, I keep on
mm,
interrupting. My apologies. Go on.
no, no, go ahead.
Well, because this leads to another quip. I did interrupt, and I'm very sorry. But the other thing is they're shielding that yet they're not. They hear something, they've never looked into it. So CRISPR-Cas9 gene editing technology. I'm at the point now where I just can't listen to this anymore. People just actually think 10 years from now we're going to be creating designer babies. When the reality is it probably won't even be employed in general for a lot of reasons, but also our knowledge of the human genome is such that we're only is very limited. CRISPR-Cas9 has been used a few times for single gene editing. You have monogenic traits only related to one thing, and people have just heard, "Oh, we can gene edit now with the Cas9 technology," and then they just think that we're going to be creating super soldiers or something tomorrow or even 10 years.
Yeah.
And so this is another concern I have that yes, they're shielded on the one hand, the lab coats, so to speak, but
Mm.
some information filters in the public and then people run away with it. and they get these wild ideas of what's. I mean, an old one that you love and you've addressed, the artificial womb. I mean, that we're all going to be dead if and when that happens. Some of us might be dead when we get extensive gene editing. I think, based because I actually read some of this stuff occasionally.
Mm.
It's going to take a long time, and so we get this sort of another. This is my own personal pet peeve. Uh, the this word that I learned a few weeks ago, ultra crepidarianism. This basically talking about things you don't know about anything about. That's very common as well because
Mm.
some of the knowledge is being filtered out there, and people just get these wild ideas. You have no idea, and I'm not an expert on Neuralink, but Elon
Yeah.
Musk says something about Neuralink, and all of a sudden people are talking about it like like before Elder Scrolls 6 comes out, we're going to get Neuralink, right? And you're
Yeah.
just thinking, I mean, I'm not an expert on this, but as a former linguist, I already proposed some of the communicative problems that can emerge from that. And it's just, I know this is a bit of a tangent and a bit of a rant, but it's very frustrating too, because on the one hand, I want the lab coats to be able to do what they're doing, but it's inevitable that some of the stuff gets filtered out, and the people who are interested. So I don't know. Do you honestly think the internet on balance has been a good thing? I've kind of arrived at the conclusion that I don't think we can
I
get rid
think,
of it, but I think it's been more negative than positive.
look, I think it has been more positive, but I mean,
Okay.
that could be said about any tech.
Yeah.
Um, was mechanization overall a net positive? Well, that led to, first wave feminism and mechanized warfare and all of that sort of stuff. I think there's pros and cons to
The
every.
double-edged sword. Yeah. Everything's a
Yeah,
double-edged sword. Yeah.
I think in general it has overall been, most of these things have been overall good. Otherwise, we would have gotten rid of them. But yeah, there's an. I remember Barbarossa once said that it's interesting to develop all these new technologies, but it's another 10 years down the track before we even start realizing you know, the consequences of what that, the the ethical fallout from what that technology has actually done.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
we don't think about that, do we? Um,
yeah.
what springs to
Well, I mean, this
mind?
is.
Sorry. Go
Well, I
ahead.
was going to say, like, we're sort of 15 years down the track now. I don't know that when Mark Zuckerberg released the Facebook, I wonder if he thought that this was where things were going to be 50 years down the track.
Obviously not. One thing I find somewhat alarming. Um, so human interactions, I mean, I'm not a huge fan of them these days. I know you and I are a bit of, as we're sort of oddballs, we're kind of reclusive, but kind of normal socialization process. And I've engaged with a lot of young people, young guys in general, but I mean, they don't. I'm not so sure if being logged in 24/7 is of great benefit for a 7 or 8 year old. I think there's a value, for example, in physical activity and play. I don't meet a lot of guys. I mean, obviously it's there's a selection bias here because I'm not the people aren't online or they're out playing or whatever, presumably. But to the point of not thinking about the impact of technologies, we never do that, do we? I mean, whatever it might
Mm,
be, we just put it out there because we, in our infinite wisdom, usually only see. I guess we only see it as a single-edged saber, right? It cuts only in the positive way. We never see it as a double-edged broadsword. And they just, oh, this is going to be good. Birth control. And, I'm not
mm,
going to debate whether it's good or bad per se, but it's brought some benefit, but it's brought some drawbacks as well with it, just as the internet has. Although I lean towards more these days, more being a negative. And whatever technology emerges in the future, and I think almost indubitably, it will be put out there without a second thought, and we will have to deal with the fallout for a decade or two afterwards. And we will again find ourselves in the position of thinking, what were we thinking? I guess we weren't. This just seemed like a neat idea at the time, but not so much right now.
mm. Yeah, well, I don't know. It's one of those things as well where we also have seen with the the culture as to what technology is allowed to be implemented and what isn't. This is one of my main things I brought up when I did that video a long time ago now on the official, that hypothetically, even if that technology was perfected tomorrow, it's not going to be the game changer that a lot of red pill guys think it is, because they're not going to be allowed to use it. You look at IVF and adoption now, like it's
You know,
it's not going to be something that like an artificial womb, something that they're just going to put into the hands of single, men who want a child. It's going to be there to help women. Um,
yeah,
like how far along are we now? We still like there's still no. It could exist, like it could have been made, but there's no great, cultural push to have a reliable male birth control.
yeah, yeah. It's a great point. So even and I think the same is going to be true of if and when, well, when, but a long time when gene editing technology emerges. I mean, one thing I have followed up on, probably what seems much more likely is going to be embryonic selection, where you know the correlations of traits with certain genes or polymorphisms rather, and you pre-select rather than your actual editing,
Yeah.
and something like that. But
To some
that's
extent, that's already happening with
yeah,
things like Down syndrome.
yeah,
Like
exactly. But
the
to much greater degree. So it's not it is a question of when in terms of understanding complex polygenic traits. But if you think about it, who's going to really be makes you? It's going to be the wealthy people, the people already who have access to things that poor people don't, which will lead to further stratification. And what's going to be interesting and frightening is we're going to live in an increasingly juxtaposed society where we have a narrative about, like, for example, I, I
Gattaca,
think,
basically.
well, or not necessarily, but I mean, I'll give you a classic example of this guy was an actual boomer, or very close to it in terms of age, who was trying to argue that embryonic selection or even potentially gene editing, what's the difference between that and reading a book? You read a book and make yourself smarter too, as if
Right.
it's the point where most people are not on board with the idea that intelligence has a large heritable component, but the people who can afford it and the know that they can do pre-selection on embryos and they can, and say 5 years from now, I guarantee you there are going to be many more polymorphisms associated with intelligence.
Yeah.
They're gonna I want that, because think about it. In this, what you pay lip service to the niceties, but you can say, look, Mr. Jones and Mrs. Jones, we can make sure that your kid has an IQ of 130, or we can just leave it to chance, and given certain averages you show, they'll probably be around 101. Which do you want? What's going to be more
Yeah. I mean,
beneficial, right?
there's there is again, the double-edged sword. There is a flip side to that. Um, there's been quite a few news stories lately about. I know Japan is. There's a news story just the other day about how Japan is going to help cover the cost of IVF.
Hmm.
Um, I think there was a news story at the start of the year in Australia about. I've got it here. Hang on. When was it dated? Yeah, so this was dated from January, and it's basically about the fact that New South Wales are going to start subsidising IVF. So what was going to cost about 6,000 is now only going to cost $1,000.
Hmm.
Um, so on the one hand, it's like, yay, this affordable and being put into the hands of regular everyday people, but at what cost? Like I I don't want my tax dollars to fund a whole new generation of single mothers who rode the cop carousel, figured out that their only way to have kids as a single mother is IVF, and I got to pay for that as a taxpayer. Like,
That said, many tax monies go to things that are not necessarily desirable or desired
No,
by
and
single individuals.
I mean, I don't know. I think again, as I said, this year has sort of been the straw that's broken my back, and I'm just like, I used to be a lot more lenient about, oh yeah, we got to have tax to keep society running, and there's things that you have to pay for, and that's whilst that's still true, I'm at a point now where I look at the fucking insanity that's going on, and I'm like, I don't want to deal with these people. I don't want to talk to, but that I don't want to argue against them. Let them have their fucking police-free neighborhoods or whatever. But the problem is that at the end of the day, I'm paying for it all. I'm paying for these fucking people to behave the way they're behaving, and I just don't want to do it anymore.
Yeah, well, that is a big departure from your former view. I mean, welcome to the Black Pill.
Mm.
I hope you have a nice time in this quadrant of the galaxy.
Eh,
It's
this nightmare reality of uh, Tinder and Black Lives Matter.
yeah, and yeah, and the
Yeah.
it just never ends, right? I've seen these tweets. Biden voters wishing death upon Trump voters. You know, there's something to the effect of, once Trump loses, I hope you experience the pain of 1,000 hells exploding in your like, nonsense like that. I don't. I mean, I've been more black pilled for longer than you, um, but I don't know. I don't know if it's possible to get more black pilled in my case. These is not me bragging. I wonder how much worse it can get in broad terms. But
Yeah.
I
Yeah, look, I don't know how much worse it can get.
mm,
Yeah, I'm watching the world descending further and further into insanity, and you've got all of these people going to all of these marches. They're fucking students and unemployed people on benefits, and I'm like, the world's going insane, and I'm paying for it to happen. Yeah, I'm almost at a point now where I'm like, I wouldn't care if the whole thing burnt to the ground.
well, if I were to invoke the old incarnation of Colttaine, to steel man that the spirit of the man that was, um, I believe that particular Colttaine would have argued a societal collapse would not be of benefit to very many people.
Well,
Um,
this is the thing, and it probably, but I've become jaded enough now that I would take the hit to see it all burn down rather than continue paying for this insanity.
wow. Well,
I
that is
I,
a huge
I
departure.
I don't know, maybe it's like the idea, you're about to be boarded by the um you're at war, you're on a ship, you're about to be boarded. You're just like, we better sink the ship because it's better to sink the ship than have it fall into the hands of the enemy, sort of thing.
Hmm. Such
But yeah,
thoughts are not entirely foreign to me, but
yeah.
I I I think if we're all to sort of just burn down, we for all the ill that's going on, there are also some good things. I wouldn't want to lose many of the benefits that have accrued over the centuries just to
Yeah.
I mean because there's only so much value and I told you so. I mean, these days especially, so Portland is sort of become this example for the country, the U.S. that is, of what happens when you let things go too far. Apparently, frequent violence, murders, things being boarded up. So that's great. Um, but I mean, told you so isn't gonna fix things. And I think people should have to learn the lessons, obviously, that they reap from their actions. But
Mm.
somebody needs to maintain some kind of status quo of just reality, because if we as in so collectively just sort of give in and just I don't know, then everything will be lost. And I I vacillate. I mean, I'm not an ardent Trump supporter, but if I were to, I you were the one who pushed me finally to the edge years ago now, convinced me that voting doesn't matter, to be fair. So credit to you. But I still, the reason why I support Trump is because I'm so tired of the left-wing lunacy,
Yeah,
and in particular the sort of left of center, sort of moderate type who pretended like this wasn't coming, given the directions of certain things. Like Brett Weinstein, the guy who was kicked from Evergreen College in the U.S., the biologist. Well, I
mm,
didn't know what happened, as if this is some deep mystery. I think
yeah,
that, yeah, I just I'm ti that's why I would, or if in some spirit, I support Trump. I didn't vote, but yeah, I would support Trump because I just think the left is completely lost. I've always been more centrist than anything else, and center myself, not really neither center right nor center, just kind of center. Although I guess center right these
yeah,
days is a good description. But yeah, I just I'm fed up with it, and but I don't know. I think it's okay for select areas to sort of just let it all burn, but then only as a lesson, and perhaps a lesson people can
mm,
draw something from rather than just let it all burn. I mean, you
yeah,
like riding your motorcycle, you like your technology.
yeah,
Um, I'm not. I think you'd be less satisfied if the the best technology you could come up with would be a flint hand axe, you know.
yeah. No,
So
I get that.
yeah,
It's more just sort of like in Australia, for example, we've got like um, across the country, there's like Aboriginal community, and they're we've had our own issues with the whole Black Lives Matter thing, and these guys, we just shovel billions of dollars a year of tax money into these communities that basically just the only thing they produce is violent misery and suffering, and you know we're constantly told like at this point we're constantly being told, oh, black lives, this is all white man, and I'm at a point now where I'm like, fuck you, I don't want to pay for it anymore. Let's just defund it all, take all the money away, take all the police out, and they can just live their quote unquote traditional culture, and we won't interfere. And you know, you guys don't come and interfere with our first world liberal democracy. Like I'm just at a point now where I just think we need to stop paying for all of this shit, where we're literally paying people to destroy our own countries.
yeah, I'm on board with that. I'm not so sure of sort of letting it all burn down, but yeah, not feasible one way or another, as you
No,
probably would
not
acknowledge. But
feasible.
I get it. I didn't imagine things. Where the other night we were talking about sort of golden era of MGTOW and whatever. I thought maybe 8, 9 years ago that we would be much closer to an openness about discussing, say, biological reality or whatever,
Mm,
and it's all run in the opposite direction. I thought the
yeah,
resistance back then was residual,
yeah,
but now I see it was just sort of like a yeast infection, basically. It's just spreading everywhere, and it's just and it smells. Not that I've ever
yeah.
smelled a yeast infection, but anyway.
I wouldn't have thought we'd be where we are today 5 years ago. Thought,
Even five, yeah. How rapid has it been? I mean, when you think about the far left lunacy, I would say it's really picked up in the last three-ish or so years.
yeah.
But yeah, 5 years ago
Yeah.
is pretty bad. But
Imagine, like, remember a time I saw was like Rad Fem saying stupid shit on Jezebel.
yeah, pretty much.
You'd do a video about like, oh look. feminist on Jezebel said.
Yeah.
Remember those days?
Well,
Can we go back to that?
yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, yeah. I mean, I try not to get lost in nostalgia since the past is the past. It's done. But yeah, it really things have proceeded quite rapidly, and there's some people that I think are smart but a bit delusional that think this is going to be somehow decelerated in the sense that it's gonna slow. Well, it's gonna slow down eventually. I don't know. You know, I made a video a while back. You know, kind of a pun on words, but you give them an inch, they'll take a league, not just a mile. They're gonna push this
Mm,
as far as they can, as long as you, and that's where I'm bored with you. Just sort of just say no. You know, if you let a toddler rant and engage in a tantrum, presumably and you kowtow to him and concede, he's going to continue. You have to just say
mm,
no at some point in time.
yeah.
It would be so easy.
There's
Just okay, you
did,
have your whatever.
did
We'll go back to living in reality.
did you see that video that recently about Sean Connery on hitting women?
No.
It was brilliant. It was basically that, like, he there's this feminist host, and she's like, "Yeah, you remember that? You remember when you said it was okay to hit women?" And Sean Connery just kind of gives her this look. He's like, "Yeah, I remember saying that." And she gives him this disapproving look, as if, "Yeah, you should be ashamed." And he just looks at her and says, "And I still stand by it. Sometimes they step out of line, and you just have to give her a little smack."
Well, he recently passed, but yeah, 90 years old.
Yeah, well, that's why it resurfaced.
Oh,
They're all
right.
like, "Oh, let's not
Hmm.
for hitting women," but he's
I,
like
I
he's
don't
just
endorse
complete.
hitting anyone, by the way, just for the record. I want my channel taken
I don't
down.
endorse hitting anyone, but I just love seeing that. It's like she's trying to, like, "Oh, you remember that shameful thing you said?" And he just dug his heels in and said, "Yeah, I remember it, and I still stand by it." Just completely shut her down. It was great. I think we need more of that. Like that. I think one of the best things I ever saw with Trump, and I think it's kind of silly to refer to it as the China virus, but I love that clip where they're in the press room of the White House, and one of the members of the press is like, "Why do you keep calling it the China virus? It's kind of racist, isn't it?" And he's like, "No, racist. I call it China virus because it came from China. I want to be accurate."
Hmm.
Just, I think we need more of that attitude of just not taking shit.
Oh yeah, I
It,
know,
it's
and
it's
you would just need
it's
enough
just
people to
yes,
do it. Yeah.
yeah. But and I think more and more people now, because I've seen it more and more. People are fucking sick of being dragged over the coals and being forced to, take the knee and grovel and apologize because of some just completely milk toast thing they've done or said. I think people are getting sick of it.
Yeah, absolutely. It wouldn't actually take that much effort just to say no, just say no, right? That
Hmm.
to these people. Um,
Yeah.
and just ignore them. I mean, I think a lot of the furore over SJWs comes from people feeding into it, I mean,
Yeah.
I know
Well,
some people
there.
like Sargon make their career out of it, but if you feed the troll, he will come, or so to speak, right?
Yeah. Well, I guess the thing is, like, it depends on what consequences. Like, you don't want to you don't want to lose your job, but it seems like if they've put a target on you like, it doesn't matter how much someone apologizes. At that point, you're going to lose your job anyway. There's there's no point apologizing to these people because no apology is ever good enough.
Yeah.
Um, but beyond that sort of stuff, you got to wonder actually getting out of virtue signaling to these people to begin with. Like, I remember when um, what's her face, Anita Sarkeesian was at the height of her success or whatever. Somebody, I don't know if it was, I think it might have been Raging Golden Eagle, did a video where he's like, or it could have been Tildy. I can't remember. Someone did a video where they were looking at sales on Steam for things that Anita Sarkeesian spoke about, and like her whole, despite all the press and publicity that she got, it didn't affect sales of specific video games at all.
Hmm.
Games that she complained about, sales didn't go down. Games that she, recommended as being good feminist titles didn't go up. Like it had no effect on the actual market.
Yeah, but I would argue on a final note that certainly in the gaming industry, some of the SJW stuff, some of the far left lunacy is affecting some
Mm.
companies in terms of,
Oh
I mean, you
yes,
look at, I think I showed you the face of the female protagonist in this up and coming
yeah.
Assassin's Creed.
Vampire the Masquerade. Oh, I
Well,
was
no,
thinking.
well, there are a number of them. That was but one of many. But yeah, the female
Yeah,
Viking, who, yeah, she needs to be athletic and whatever, but she basically looks like a man. You could put a beard on her and she would just be a man. I think her name was
yeah.
Alvor or something. It
But and I get that. What I'm saying is based on the sales figures, comparing sales figures of titles against like Anita Sarkeesian's ranting against certain things,
hmm,
it doesn't seem to have an effect. And you have to wonder why these companies are doing it when these video games, like those fucking assholes out in the street rioting and burning shit down, aren't the people that are going to buy the next Assassin's Creed game. So why even appease their social
yeah,
justice?
I don't. That doesn't make sense to me either. It's just as the people who
Like
criticize The Witcher 3 for just having too
yeah,
many
oh,
white
for having white people in a
in a
based on medieval Europe.
yeah, yeah.
But I just, and I mean, CD Projekt Red seems like one of the few companies that would tell these people to go fuck themselves. But yeah,
No, they don't though. Not really.
mm,
I mean, I think they do what they want and what they need to do for their vision, but they don't outright rightly say
yeah,
go whatever, go screw yourself.
like I just honestly, I just don't understand it. Like even in where they spent millions developing the game with voice acting and so that they could have a male or female protagonist, depending on your preference. I actually played as Finn Shepard, but
Yeah, so do I.
the idea that that is actually um, the idea that that is actually appeasing the feminists when you look at the actual sales figures and despite being arguably the most SJW um, AAA title of that era, um, it still only got like a 14% female player base.
Oh
You,
yeah, I mean
you, your
yeah,
player base was still like 5/6 male player base.
you know. Yeah, I mean
I just you got to wonder what the payoff the payoff these people see. They just haven't worked out the get woke go broke thing yet. I don't know. Like
yeah, I mean I don't get it either. Because I've thought about this very same thing, and it doesn't. Like
hmm,
for example, why? Here's another final quip. Like on the Vampire Masquerade, which is, I mean, I'm past the point of disappointment. I mean, you wait 15 years and whatever. But here's the thing: people like to immerse themselves in fantasy because it removes them from the drudgery of their reality. And generally speaking, in a fantasy, you want to play a character that looks reasonably attractive in concert with the attributes like whether it's a male or female, whatever. I don't
hmm,
want to play a hideous Marilyn Manson looking whatever. I don't want to play a female protagonist that
yeah,
literally looks like she's been on gear for years and her clitoris is the size of a 2 liter fucking water bottle. And I
yeah.
just because that's just
Well,
not
that
appealing. I want to look at the aesthetics. It's a fantasy. I don't like the look. I accept reality. I don't like the reality I live in. It's not fun. It sucks. So give me something nice. That's the basic argument. But you want to
Yeah,
fucking take away the nice shit in the fantasy and turn it into the same fucking muck and guck in this reality and think, why would you do this? Nobody wants that. People like fantasy precisely because it removes them from fucking reality. Ugh,
yeah.
sorry, it's really this
Well,
particular thing.
yeah. Well, the one that gets me, like, does my head in the most in recent news is the news that apparently it's been confirmed Lashana getting her own 007 film. She's confirmed as the new 007. And it's like, who the fuck is this aimed at? Men like James Bond because they want to be James Bond.
Yeah,
Women, to the extent that a few women are into James Bond, they like it because they want to be a Bond girl. They want to get with James Bond. Like, I don't. No men want to be Lashana Lynch, and I don't think women want to be either. Like, I don't know who the fuck a
yeah.
female James Bond film is
Well,
actually supposed to appeal to,
it's
because
part of
it
the
doesn't
same
appeal
thread
to.
of
Yeah,
problems.
it doesn't appeal to any men I know, and it doesn't.
And again, we go back to the earlier part of the discussion. People like looking at pretty people in general. It's just the
Mm,
way we are. I don't. I mean, this is. I was half tempted to get Assassin's Creed, and maybe I'll wait for a sale. Though with the delay of Cyberpunk, I'm getting more tempted, just because I. As of the audience, it's my favorite. This period of medieval history, one of my, is probably my favorite in ever. But then I just thought, okay, you're doing this. Like, and Vampire, it's a cult classic for a number of reasons. I mean, some of the female facial aesthetics were better in the original one. I just
mm,
don't, and it came out in 2004. So I, I don't know. I think this is this is what is really disturbing. Is your point that it wouldn't affect sales? Give us our escapism. Let us keep our fantasy. You know, I,
yeah,
what are we going to see
but
next? Obese alcoholic protagonists
yeah,
as warrior heroes. I mean,
but,
come on.
but this goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning, and it's sort of something that I spoke about last night when we were talking as well. But that we see the same trend with this, where everyone's like, rah rah, female, finally a female James Bond, a win for women everywhere. And it's like, you watch as soon as this film releases, it's going to be the same as Birds of Prey, where everyone's going to be standing around going, how did this movie fail? Obviously misogyny.
Yeah,
It's like they're all standing around like, rah rah, this is going to be such a great film because it's got a woman in it, and then they're all baffled. They can't figure out why the film failed. That's what's going to happen because they believed in their own lie.
yeah, and I think we've come
And
full circle.
when reality comes knocking, it's gonna fail. It is. Nobody's going to go to see a female James Bond.
Some people will, but it'll be insufficient in
Some people
numbers.
will. I suspect it will be because, I mean, female Ghostbusters failed, Birds of Prey failed, but I think, just given the original source material, I think that the female James Bond film could potentially be the greatest box office failure of the get woke, go broke period of Hollywood.
Hmm.
That's my prediction. Coltaine's prediction for that movie.
Well, I'm not going to contest that. That seems likely. Um, yeah, I I could deal with all of this, but can they just still make good games with nice aesthetic people in it? That's all I want. Well, I want some other things, but that's one of the things I want. It's not a big. Just give me some nice aesthetic characters.
Yeah,
Um,
but
that's
you're
all
a
I want.
misogynist, so you don't get what you want.
Uh, no, no, I definitely. I mean, Vampire. I was initially thrilled beyond all measure, especially for somebody as black-pilled and not thrilled as I normally am. And then the delays and the visuals and the graphics. I just lost. Yeah,
Yeah, they
it's
fired the original writer as well.
yes, they
So
absolutely.
was it over? Was it over SJW infraction?
It's not clear. I had heard that I think his name is Brian Masoda, if recollection serves. I I heard that he definitely is left leaning, but it wasn't. This is the myth, the rumor, but it wasn't enough. It's like, yeah, something. It's like saying, yeah, I think some degree of social programs and welfare is okay versus no, everyone needs their money taken away and it all needs to be given to the poor. Something like that kind of division. Where he said, yeah, that's what I heard. He just
Yeah,
wasn't woke enough. He was woke, but not enough, basically.
yeah,
So it's absolutely baffling because the guy was. I don't even know how you're going to have that game if it ever comes out. It's going to be a colossal failure. It's going to be a betrayal of people who've played the game off and on for a decade and a half. Some people have modded it, created mods, who've tried to enhance it. It it's just what Paradox has done, or yeah, I guess they're doing it. It's absolutely insane.
yeah,
And honestly, sometimes I feel like you do. In the case of Paradox, right? I believe their most lucrative venture is Crusader Kings. They recently released Crusader Kings 3 a few months ago, a month or two ago. And, I don't know. I want some people now to just rise up and say, all these English and Scandinavian kings, they're all white. Let's boycott.
yeah,
I want them to just
yeah,
fall on their face for the crap they did on Vampire and other things. I'm just,
yeah,
I'm tired. I mean, it's one thing to sort of ruin, I don't know, some obscure academic sphere. It's another thing to just take things to the mainstream and the games, because I'm an RPG player, always have been. I want in an RPG, part of it is the aesthetic. You want to look at nice things and nice looking people. And if you see some, barring the occasional monster, obviously, but I don't know. I just don't. I hope at least in that sphere there can be some pushback, but I don't think it's going to be the case. I think it's going to be, SJW is full steam ahead. So
yeah. Well,
unfortunately, I still have some
like I
hope
said,
in
I'm just
CD Project Red. Barring, well, despite all these delays, I don't think it's going to be released till next year. But whatever.
yeah. Well,
I
that'll give me time to build my new gaming PC at least.
if only I could. Well, afford it among other things. Well, anyway, it's been a nice chat. I hope the audience enjoyed that. It's rare to get the elusive Kangaroo Slayer on, so I suspect he will be heading back out there to slay more kangaroos for a while, and before he makes another appearance. But yeah, anything else you'd like to?
Yeah. No, no. Thanks for having us on.
Yeah, yeah. Everyone, take care. Enjoy your weekend of lunacy. I mean, they're still counting votes. In the U.S. Who knows what's going to happen? I have no idea. We don't know. I guess that's the only exciting thing, right? We don't know. Anything could happen within the parameters of reality, at least. So, yeah, take care.
Adios.
If you liked this video, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you enjoy my content, please consider making a donation or becoming a patron. Thanks for watching.